I have the greatest respect for people who homeschooled using only a library card. You know, when you think about the way homeschooling was in the 1980s and the early 1990s, when they really were making it up, they were inventing the wheel. And then, you know, the resources available to homeschoolers exploded. The different ways of homeschooling, you know, have changed and shifted with regards to, you know, maybe some friends in the basement of somebody's house to, you know, really well-formed and organized co-ops.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Hi, I'm Jim Mason, President of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and this is another episode of Homeschool Talks, where I get to talk to interesting people in homeschool land about things of interest to me and other homeschoolers. I'm joined today by Sue Manning, who is a longtime homeschool mom, military mom, and has recently begun really supporting homeschoolers in Maryland through a more formal organization. And we're going to be talking about all three of those things today with Sue Manning. Welcome, Sue.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Well, good. So let's start with your homeschooling career. I understand you were a military family when you began homeschooling?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We were a military family. We had little kids when the military said, hey, guess what? We'd like you guys to go visit the land of the rising sun, which was quite an adventure for us and quite a shift in our understanding of culture and how things worked. And we happened to be going there just as my oldest was turning 5. And they actually have a really great DoD school where we were stationed in Japan, and that was our plan. But we got there in the summer, and we had several experiences, changing day and night on your children, and you know, showing up in a place where everyone looks different, and none of the signs or anything they can understand really kind of brought us to the realization that we maybe wanted to keep them a little closer to us than putting them in the DoD school. And at the same time, I met a neighbor, you know, in a military installation overseas. You tend to be packed into pretty tight housing quarters. And there was a family 2 doors down from me who was planning to homeschool their child who was about to turn 5. And so I got a chance to speak with her, learn a little bit more about what she was thinking of doing with her child. And the more she talked, the more I thought, wow, this sounds pretty great. And so from there, I never looked back. We jumped into it together. We're still best friends to this day. And our children are second generation best friends. And, you know, it gave us so much opportunity to travel while we were there because we weren't locked into any kind of a school schedule. And then when we finally returned to the States, we returned to the Washington, D.C. area. We were on the Maryland side of the river, and the schools were okay, but I was, you know, just really enjoying the freedom and the ability to work with my children, you know, in a way that worked for them. And I had at that point too, that I was homeschooling. I had 2 girls, and I had a tag-along little boy. And as he got closer and closer to his school age years, we realized he was not developing the same way that, you know, typically developing children were. And that threw a whole new wrinkle in to what we were doing. And the more I, you know, went through the process of having him tested and meeting with all of the, you know, infants and toddlers people, their answer was put him in pre-K. And he was 3 years old, and I just couldn't do it. It just broke my heart. And I remember going to an appointment for him up at Kennedy Krieger in Baltimore, and the lady there very, very gently told me that there was no way that I could possibly handle his needs. And if you want to challenge a mother, you just go ahead and tell her that there's no way she can handle her own child's needs. And so that sent me spinning in the direction of exploring what it meant to homeschool a special needs child. And fast forward, 20 years, I have a graduate from Johns Hopkins University with a degree in civil engineering who's traveling all over the world inspecting bridges. As a matter of fact, we had that recent tragedy in Baltimore. She was on a ship inspecting that bridge the very next day. I have another one who's at the University of Virginia, and she is she went the trades route. So she's actually learning to be a plumber, which was shocking to all of us, but she loves it. It's been, really good experience for her. And then my youngest is in 11th grade. So
I didn't realize that the University of Virginia had a degree in plumbing.
they have a trades apprenticeship program. So it's a special school that you apply to through their facilities maintenance department. And it's a 4-year program. And you come out of it with your journeyman's license, and you can choose one of the skilled trades.
Wow. That's very interesting. That's probably of a really high level of interest to many homeschooling families these days who I think there's a lot more interest in pursuing the trades track today than there maybe was years ago.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, Mike Rowe said it best. We have created a lot of shovel-ready jobs in a society that doesn't want to hold a shovel. And, I think there's really a lot of need for those people. And I sure know that when my septic tank alarm went off, I wanted a plumber there right away.
That's right. When you need a plumber, you really need a plumber.
Yes.
Well, I have a note here that says your lifelong friend that you met in the military is someone I know.
Yes. So my lifelong friend is Shelley Wisnett.
Oh, okay. It just says Shelley here in my notes, and I was wondering, who could it be? Yeah, so it's a small world. Yeah, we were in rec league soccer and some travel soccer and there's a private school where we lived that homeschooled kids could play on the private school soccer team later on when my younger kids came into high school age. So it's a very small world in this homeschooling world, and it's a very big world. You've traveled over to Japan and around the country in your military career. A lot of military homeschoolers have told me similar things to you, that it's really a great way to keep consistency for your family as you move around. Is that so? You sound like a homeschooler similar to me. My wife was always pretty sold out, but I was, okay, we'll give it a try. We'll see how it works out, and we'll make a decision, year by year. And then eventually I became sold out too, but it sounds like you kind of dipped your toes into the water as well, and then your military life maybe helped you make a plunge into the homeschool world.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And I had always said I would consider homeschooling. I was not opposed to it, but that was in that sort of hypothetical world, theoretical world. And my parents both were public school teachers. And so between the two of them, they have over 80 years of public school teaching under their belts. And I grew up in the public school system. But yeah, when I started talking to Shelley and started really exploring what it meant to take control of your children's education, it appealed to me in a big way. And my husband was a little bit more like you, where he said, well, it worked for us. Why would we want to do that for our kids? But, the longer we did it, he said, well, okay, we'll give it one more year. And okay, we'll give it one more year. And okay, we'll give it one more year. And then there just was no question after that. And really the thing about the military experience is transitioning from state to state, all the laws are different and all the, requirements are different. And it just helped to have that consistency for them, where we weren't jumping from a school system that required a certain class in 7th grade, and then the other school system required that class in 8th grade. And it just got confusing. So we were just able to follow our own plan, and it didn't matter where we were. When the Navy told us it was time to go, we could just pack up and go. The
Navy, huh? So I way long time ago, I was in the Navy. I was on a ship, and I've been to Japan only in the Navy. What part of Japan were you guys stationed in when you met Shelley?
We were in Yokosuka.
Uh-huh. I've been there. I have been there several times. It's a big city. It's a crazy, years and years ago, it was a crazy big city. So, Sue Manning, as you have kind of settled into Maryland, how long have you been in Maryland and kind of in the same place homeschooling your kids there?
Yeah, we landed in Maryland at the end of elementary school for my girls. So it's been about 15 years that we stayed in Maryland. My husband finished out his Navy career and retired from the Navy, and then went straight back to work for the Department of the Navy. And so we stayed in the same area, which was a real blessing because it allowed us to set up a community. We got involved in co-ops and made friends, and that was really, really nice as the girls, especially the girls, were getting older, to be stable and staying in one spot.
So the question that we always get asked as homeschoolers, and, it probably causes most homeschoolers who get this question to roll their eyes a little bit, but how has it been for your kids and socialization?
The socialization question. My favorite story about the socialization question is we went to the dentist one day in the middle of the week and in the middle of the day, as we are, so gloriously allowed to do as homeschoolers. You get those great appointment times. And we happened to be there at the same time. Another homeschool family that we knew was there, and the kids started playing in the little play area. It was a pediatric dentist. And the nurse came out and she said, she called us back and she said, "Oh, you were playing so nicely with those other children." And my daughter said, "Yes, they're my friends." And she said, "Oh," "Do you go to the same school?" And my daughter said, "No, we're homeschooled." And immediately the nurse's face changed and she goes, "You're homeschooled? Well, how do you have any friends?" And my response to her was, "I think you just saw, that they have friends." And so, yeah, we made an effort to make sure we had co-ops. We made sure we had the girls that played soccer. They were in American Heritage Girls. We did a lot of different activities with them that allowed them to be with other kids their age, even kids that were in school. And they always had friends that were in school. So we had homeschool friends and we had public school friends. And I remember at one point, my middle daughter, was a very social butterfly. And she said to me, "Mom, I spend way more time with my friends than my friends in public school do." Because there were no restrictions on when we could be with them. So to me, it really is a huge myth. And it's difficult to explain, but I think my kids spent more time doing extracurricular stuff than they did academic stuff, really.
How has it been for your son homeschooling with special needs challenges?
I think the thing that's been the best for him is that we haven't had to treat him any differently. He wasn't placed into a life skills class in the public schools and sort of segregated in that way. We had a wonderful homeschool co-op that just accepted him as he was and never put any restrictions on which classes he could be in. He could take, any class he wanted to sit through. And they were very understanding about his ability or inability to participate or do the classwork. But it really made him feel like a part of a group in a way that I don't know that he would have had a similar experience in a public school, being fully accepted by typically developing kids.
So one of the great strengths, I've written about this, many times over the years, one of the great strengths of the homeschooling movement is that nobody really tells us to do things, but we voluntarily do a lot of things that are really good. And one of the things that we voluntarily do together is form co-ops and groups and parent support. And at the top of that is, at the top in some ways, almost every state has a state organization that helps homeschooling groups and families all over the state, as well as kind of help monitor the legislature and things like that. And it appears to me from the notes I have here that You're either crazy or you're one of those super motivated people who, when you finish homeschooling, you decide to help everybody else in the world homeschool. What's going on with that?
Yeah, I would say that I would say the crazy part probably rings pretty true, especially with my husband at this point. He retired and he looked at me and he said, "Why aren't you retiring?" But yeah, no, that's true. I'm on the board of directors for the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators, which is MACHI for short. And it was a really kind of an interesting journey because during COVID, formed a Facebook group in my area in Maryland, which is the sort of the southern part of Maryland, east and south of Washington, D.C. And I kept seeing people posting on Facebook these just absolutely pitiful and heart-wrenching posts about how the way the public schools had just abruptly shut down was having a negative impact on their children. And so my response to that was to sort of write an open letter to public school parents saying, "Hey, I'm a homeschool mom. This has not affected us at all. We're still doing everything that we've been doing. And if you want to know how to make that happen for your children, I'm more than willing to talk to you." And all of a sudden, it was like I had a full-time job because when push came to shove, these parents were really not going to accept the limited education that their children were getting through the online efforts that the schools were making. And I'm not maligning the public schools. I think they did the best they could with the situation that they were dealing with, but it really was pretty horrible. And I think in the intervening years that's been borne out by test scores and things from, these children who really did. I don't know about your area, but our area, it was more than a year that they did online school. And it just was less than effective. And so, like I said, all of a sudden I had a full-time job with people calling me and texting me and emailing me and asking me questions about how to do this homeschooling thing. And we formed a huge group of people that pulled their children out of school and were, looking for guidance and information and really had no idea where to go. And so that turned into a Facebook group of, well over 1,000 families, which, in our area was amazing. There's just, we don't have that many people in our area. And what really encouraged me was how many of them decided not to send their kids back to school when the online school ended. They said, "Hey, we're starting to see the benefits of this. And, we think we'd like to keep doing it." And it's been, I think, really a platform for a change in awareness of, being able to control your child's education and all the benefits that homeschooling gives you. But more than that, I think it opened up my heart to serve homeschoolers. I had always said I would never work with dipping your toes in the pond homeschoolers because it's frustrating. And then, I looked back at my experience with Shelley, where I said, look at how she changed my life by being willing to sit with me. And so it really did change my perspective. And at about the same time, our state homeschool organization, which had been really sort of slowing down because it was run by people who had started homeschooling when homeschooling in Maryland first became legal in the mid-1980s. And they were way past their homeschooling years. Their children were gone. They had grandchildren at this point that were homeschooling, and they were tired of running a state organization. And so COVID shut it down. They deactivated their website. They, stopped doing really anything and started to look around to see who the next generation of people to pass it to would be. And God has a hand in everything, but it ended up that a friend of mine, who you also know, Linus James, got our heads together and said, we've been talking about doing something on a bigger scale for a long time. Maybe this is it. And we met with the previous board, and they said, yeah, we feel like you have some good ideas about, how to take what was really vital in the 1980s, but sort of update it, bring it into, the current landscape of homeschooling, which had changed in ways they didn't understand. And so they signed it over to us about 2 years ago, and we've been working as hard as we can to try and get in touch with as many Marylanders and let them know that we're back and we're here and we're having events and we're ready to serve you. And it's been a blessing. It really has been. I mean, it's been a lot of work, but it's so essential to have a state organization that's trying to be a liaison between the people in the trenches and the people that are making the decisions. And so we are fairly comfortable in that spot. And I think it's been a good experience. Maryland is not a difficult state to homeschool in from a administrative perspective. But our legislature is not homeschool friendly. And so being able to be sort of that in between, I think has been valuable to, the people who are just trying to get it done.
You mentioned you were updating from the previous way the group was kind of approaching things, and that today's homeschoolers may have different needs. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, I think, I have the greatest respect for people who homeschooled using only a library card. When you think about the way homeschooling was in the 1980s and the early 1990s, when they really were making it up, they were inventing the wheel. And then, the resources available to homeschoolers exploded. The different ways of homeschooling, have changed and shifted with regards to, maybe some friends in the basement of somebody's house to, really well-formed and organized co-ops. And we have the luxury of having umbrella groups in the state of Maryland, which allow us to sort of put a buffer between us and the state when it comes to oversight for the, compliance with the law. And the umbrellas were really the only thing that was going on when they were running the state organization. You worked through your umbrella, and that's what connected you to Machi. But as people started to be more confident and the laws became friendlier and the school districts became more comfortable with homeschoolers, people stopped really using umbrellas quite so much. And Machi didn't really have a way in place to connect with those homeschoolers. And so that was, I think, the biggest thing that we did was we really updated the website, that we really went in search of those groups that weren't affiliated with the umbrella groups so that we could bring in homeschoolers that were choosing to review through the Board of Education. And so we're not connected to Machi through the umbrella groups. And I think that's been an interesting learning experience and a little bit of a challenge, is that now that we have so many different ways to homeschool, how do you keep that connection between parent-directed education and just not in public school? And so we are an organization that believes strongly in parent-directed education, but you're also dealing with people that are in online schools that are, they're classifying themselves as homeschoolers, and they really do have some of the same needs as parent-directed homeschoolers do with regards to socializing their children and, that kind of thing. So it's a line to walk between, really feeling like we want to support the people that are homeschooling in a traditional sense, while not excluding the people that are choosing things like online programs where they're really just plugging in the computer every morning and letting someone else, run the show. So I'd say that's been a big challenge. But we're also in Maryland, we have such a diverse body of population. Our demographics are so diverse, and those families that have typically really just remained within their community for support are really starting to reach out. And so we have a large section of Black homeschooling families. We have a large segment of Hispanic homeschooling families. And then, of course, with military being so prevalent in the DMV and in Maryland, we have a lot of non-English speaking people who are coming over here thinking they, want to homeschool. You have a Navy guy who married a Japanese woman and she wants to homeschool, but there's a language barrier, those kinds of things. So that's been a real effort for us, because I think historically those people have been sort of not ignored, but they weren't actively seeking help. So we weren't actively looking to help them. And I think now there's a real big push on our part to actively seek them out, so that we can connect with them and figure out how we can help them.
What about the post-COVID exodus people? Sounds like you're in close touch with a lot of people who maybe wouldn't have considered homeschooling before they had the COVID experience. How's that going for you?
Yeah, that's a tough one because, we have a lot of people who were public educated themselves and they were perfectly comfortable having their children in public education. And then because they saw what was happening to their children, they were kind of reluctant homeschoolers. I think the biggest challenge there, the ones that have kept their children home, are still attached to the public school mindset. We hear conversations a lot about, well, why can't we get, tax money to help supplement homeschooling? Or why can't our children participate in, PE at the school or band or drama? And so those conversations are difficult and ongoing, I think, because you have the traditional minded homeschoolers who say, no, just let me do it myself and stay out of my way. And then you have these new COVID homeschoolers who are a little bit more accustomed to getting some help from the outside, that there's a tension there that we're, working through, and we're trying to do it gracefully, and we're trying to do it in a way that really points people towards more parent directed choices. But it's tough. I mean, I think that's, I don't think it's Maryland. I don't think that's unique to Maryland. I think that's, something that all the state organizations that I'm talking to are dealing with.
What would you say to other homeschoolers out there who may be looking to step into a bigger leadership role in their own communities?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about traditional homeschoolers, I think we need as many of them as we can get, because I think what I see is that a lot of people are coming out of the PTA and thinking, well, I'm going to throw my weight into, the homeschooling world, which is wonderful, and I'm not discouraging that at all. But I think we need people who have the history and the background and understand the struggle there to balance, sort of the new worldview that some of these homeschoolers are coming into. I would say that the reward is great. I mean, I think for every 20 families I spend an hour with trying to help them figure out how to get started homeschooling, even if only one or two of them come back to me a year later and say, wow, my conversation with you really changed my life, that's worth it to me. I think about those children and what they're going to experience from having been homeschooled. I think all the work is worth it when you hear those comments. So I would say if you're interested in being involved, contact your local state homeschool organization. They always need help. There's always just a few of us trying to make it work. And, if we have people that are willing to help, there's plenty to put into hands that are willing to serve.
Well, you guys say it matchy, and next week I'm flying to Minnesota where they call it mache. It's the same M-A-C-H-E. But one of the things that really encouraged me was the kind of reconstituting and reviving your organization. And you and Lanissa are doing a great job there. I understand the conference this year was bigger and better, and you're on an upward trajectory. Is that right?
I think we're connecting with more people as time goes by, and people become more aware. It's a blessing. We're part of the National Alliance of Home Educators, and that has been a blessing because it connects us with people in other states that are experiencing the same things we're experiencing or have experienced the same things. And so we're not having to reinvent the wheel. We have plenty of people who have just, bent over backwards to donate their time and their experiences to help us, make this work. So yeah, I would say we're growing. And we're growing in a great direction. We have a wonderfully diverse body of members. We have some really excellent meetups at our conferences that are, I think, unique to homeschool conferences. We're really reaching lots of different kinds of people. And that's super important to us.
What another kind of bright light for me earlier this year, just last month, I was in Utah at their conference, and they're in kind of a similar situation to you, that the conference sort of died out right before COVID, and then it started up again last year. And what was really interesting to me, it was kids who had been homeschooled who are now having kids and homeschooling that started it up again and are running it. And we've been around a long enough time as kind of a movement and now moving into kind of an institutional kind of educational approach that our kids and grandkids are homeschooling and stepping into leadership roles.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I know I'm always impressed when we go to the national meetings with Texas. They're the ones I've noticed that have a lot of children who were homeschooled that are stepping up to serve their state organization. And I've also seen that in my local co-op. We now have people who graduated from that co-op that are coming back to volunteer to teach at that co-op, and several who are starting to have babies and have no intention of doing anything other than homeschooling. So yes, watching this multi-generational thing is a lot of fun.
So what do you have to say? I'll give you the last word today. We'll be heard by homeschoolers all over the country and perhaps even on some ships at sea. What would you have to say to people out there today who are maybe needing some encouragement or some guidance? Just a general shot in the arm for the homeschool mom who's coming into the home stretch of the homeschool year.
Yeah. Oh boy, isn't that right? Zan Tyler talks about homeschool being a marathon and not a sprint. And I think the thing that I've learned is the hardest thing to do, but the most essential thing to do is if you have any thoughts of comparing your family to anyone else's family, do whatever you have to do to take those thoughts and just remove them from your brain, because what you're doing for your family is right. And, I think community is huge. I think there's a huge benefit to being a part of a community. So if you can get involved with your state organization, I know most of them have ways for you to meet up with people in your community. I think that's a huge thing. But really the thing that I say to my husband when on my most frustrated day is, if all I did was set my son in front of the TV and let him watch YouTube videos on something that he was interested in, he would still be getting a better education than he would if someone else were doing it, because I love him. And I don't think that you can compare an education where someone's being paid to do something with an education that you get from someone who is doing it because God said, this child is yours and I've trusted you with him or her. And so those frustrating moments at the end of the day, we never take snow days. We always take sun days. So that when we have those beautiful days outside, I say, hey, you know what? We're just going to go to the beach, or we're going to go to the playground, or we're going to go on a hike. And, don't be afraid to take those days. You've got to take care of you. But back to the original thought, comparing yourself to other families is tough. And I think in this day and age of social media and the ways that people always put their best face forward and you don't necessarily see what's going on in their home, when you're comparing yourself to them, that makes things harder than they need to be. So if you're a homeschool mom and you have made this choice because God directed you to do it, just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. And on those days when you need to flip over on your back and just float for a minute, go ahead and do it. It's okay. It's good for you. It's good for the kids. And they may need that too. So yeah, I always tell people, find a friend that you can talk to, and you can say all those things that you want to say out loud, but you never ever would. You say those to your friends. When you want to quit, it's okay. Say that I want to quit, and then don't do it. That would be, I think, my biggest encouragement. Stop comparing yourself and find a friend.
Yeah, homeschooling is a big commitment, and it's often difficult, but the relationships that you develop with your own children are just invaluable. So I really appreciate the advice and things I tell people. We get involved with people who are maybe their homeschooling is being questioned. And the great advantage of homeschooling is that your kids can advance at their own pace. And the great kind of error of public schooling is that everybody has to advance at the same pace. And it's, if you know any number of kids at all, you just know that they differ so much from each other. And some kids, come to learning early and can, read before they're 4. And other kids don't really get, interested in reading until they're 7 or 8. And that's okay. I mean, that's really okay. It's not a problem. It's okay. And, having loving parents who monitor their own children and keep on top of them and care for them, decide what's best and when, is kind of irreplaceable. So Sue Manning has been my guest today, and she and one of my favorite people in the whole world, Lannister James, have stepped into leadership in a state organization that's been revitalized after the long winter of COVID. The Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators, also known as MACHE. How can people get a hold of you if they have questions about revitalizing groups in their area?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with us is through our website, which is www.machemd. You got to put that MD on there, otherwise you go to Minnesota, machemd.org. And there is a button on there to contact us. And we love to talk to people. So we would love it if you would visit our website and check us out.
Well, thank you so much, Sue. Again, my guest, Sue Manning, head of the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators, and apparently friends with lots of my friends, which is great. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share this with your friends. And if you would like to get upcoming podcasts delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for Homeschool Talks email list. Subscribers will also receive exclusive content and will be able to submit questions to address in future podcasts. And if you're not yet a member of HSLDA, we'd love for you to join with us, because homeschooling is a community effort, as Sue so well told us about. And being a part of HSLDA helps homeschoolers all over the country as well. We're very proud of our how we help members and non-members and help homeschoolers all over the country. And if you want to join with us, please do so. And you can find out ways of doing that at homeschooltalks.com/join. So once again, I'm Jim Mason, president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and thanks for joining Sue Manning and I today.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's Online Academy. When you're homeschooling a high schooler, it can be difficult to stay on top of everything they're learning. The good news is you don't have to do it all on your own. HSLDA Online Academy offers more than 40 live, interactive online courses for grades 7 through 12. To view a list of course offerings, visit academy.hslda.org. That's academy.hslda.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.